Okay, so we're looking at combining probabilities now. So if we look at the box of information, we have the idea of mutually exclusive events. So E and F are mutually exclusive events if their intersection is the null set. So what we mean by mutually exclusive events, they are events that don't have anything in common. So basically it would be impossible for them to occur at the same time. So if we think about animals, it would be impossible to be a cat and a dog at the same time. So those would be mutually exclusive events because there isn't a cat-dog intersection. Where we have overlapping events, which are two mutually exclusive events that can occur together. If A and B are overlapping events, the probability that either A or B occurs is the sum of those two probabilities minus the intersection of the probabilities, meaning that A and B occur at the same time. This is also referred to as the union of two events and be written again as the same way as I have the probability of A versus the probability of B minus the probability of A and B happening together. So if you look at number 1, it says, what is the probability that a rolled die is less than 3 or an even number? So we have two events here. The idea that we have less than 3 or an even number. Okay, so if I call this A and I call that B, we're looking at, the probability of A union B. Because remember, union means or. So we're looking at using this idea right there. So probability less than 3. Well, how many numbers on a single die are less than 3? We would get a 1 or a 2. Now the probability that we would roll an even number, so that's a probability of 2 out of 6. And you want to leave them in not reduced because you're probably going to have to add these and it's nice to have a common denominator. So the probability of even, well, our even numbers are 2, 4, and 6. So that's probability of 3/4. Whoops. Not 3/4, 3/6. Because remember, we have 3 outcomes or 6 total possible outcomes. And then finally, we have the probability of the and, this part. So this, in this situation, means that our number is less than 3 and it's an even number. So there's only one number that is less than 3 and even, and that's the number 2. And so that's going to give us a probability of 1/6. So again, using our formula here, I have the probability of A plus the probability of B minus their intersect. So 2/3 plus 3, or excuse me, 2/6 plus 3/6 is 5/6. 5/6 minus 1/6 is 4/6, which reduces to 2/3. So the probability that a die is rolled and the number is less than 3 or an even number is 2/3. So let's look at number 3. So it says if 2 die are rolled, what is the probability of either getting a sum of 6 or at least 1 3? So again, we break this down. We've got the sum of 6 or at least 1 3. Because the sum of 6, we can get that a number of ways. I can roll a 2 and a 4. I can roll a 3 and a 3. Or I can roll a 4 and a 2. So again, and 1 and 5 and 5 and 1. Forgot those. So the probability of sum of 6 is equal to 5 out of 36. The probability of getting at least 1 3. Now they're not saying that I have to get the sum of 6 and at least 1 3. They're just saying if I roll 2 die, what is the probability that I get at least 1 3? And if you look at your chart, you're going to see there's 11 ways to do that. So we've got 11 out of 36. And then finally, we have the and situation. What is the probability that I get a sum of 6 and at least 1 3? Well, in order to get a sum of 6 and 1, 3, there's only one way that can happen, and that is a 3, 3. And so that comes from 1 out of 36. So again, if I write this out, I've got 5 out of 36 plus 11 out of 36 minus 1 out of 36, giving us 15 out of 36, which reduces to 5/12. So the probability that I either get a sum of 6 or at least 1, 3 is 5/12. Number 4 is really similar. So it says if 2 die are rolled, what is the probability of getting either a sum of 11 or at least 1, 2? So sum of 11, that's only 2 ways that we can do that. I can either roll a 5, 6 or a 6 then a 5. So that's a 2 out of 36. Now the probability that I get at least 1, 2, at least 1, 2. So that's all the outcomes I could get a 2 first, then all the outcomes when I could get a 2 second, and then that one outcome where I get a 2, 2, and that's how I come up with the 11 out of 36. Then finally, with 2 die that only go up to 6, and I'm trying to get a sum of 11 and at least 1, 2 at one time, that is impossible, because to get 11 using a 2, you'd have to do 2 plus 9, and 9 isn't on a set of die. So we would have a 0 out of 36 here. So if I go to add these up, I would do 2 out of 36 plus 11 out of 36. But to take away 0 is meaningless. It's not going to change the value. So really, we're just left with 13 out of 36 as our probability.